Hello and welcome to Ficsation, where my guests talk about their fiction fixations, except not really this time. We're going to break our formula in our first ever season of this because we can do that. I'm joined today by Keith from the Brockton Bay Chronicles podcast, who has been a guest on my other show, Stories Across Borders, a couple of times. Hello.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you for having me on.
Anytime. It's always a pleasure. And today you have brought an interesting one to us. We are breaking our format, as I said, and we're actually not going to be looking at a fictional piece of media. Instead, we are going to we're going to have a very casual conversation about Cosmos, a Spacetime Odyssey, which is a non-fiction anthology documentary series originally from the 70s or 80s, I think it was. 70s?
Yeah, premiered in the fall of 1980.
1980, okay, which was hosted by Carl Sagan. And then later it got rebooted by Neil deGrasse Tyson and, believe it or not, Seth MacFarlane in the, I think it was 2010s.
I believe that sounds about right, yeah.
And
sometime in that time frame.
And yeah, this should be interesting because you grew up on the older one, and I didn't grow up on either, but I saw in my sort of late teens, early 20s, I saw the more modern version and thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, it is. I actually, well, first of all, as I said, thanks for having me on, and thanks for breaking your format and allowing me to talk about this piece of media that actually was pretty impactful on my life. I think I can say without being sounding too hyperbolic. To set the scenario for you, I'm going into my junior year. Well, pardon me, between my junior and senior year in high school. I'm not the best student, despite the efforts of my beloved mother at the time, wanting me to, worried about whether or not I was actually even going to graduate high school. But science was always one of my favorite classes. I always had a love for science fiction growing up. Early Star Trek, Star Wars, of course, when it came out, based 1999, and so I always had a love to know things. I always wanted to kind of learn things, even if I wasn't able to sit my butt down in the seat in the class and keep my mouth shut while the teacher talked. But this show came on, and I remember Dr. Sagan from his being involved with the Voyager spacecraft and the Viking spacecraft, when they landed on Mars. And so I was aware of them. I was a little bit of an astronomy geek, wannabe anyway. And this show came on and I was fixated on it. And, it was nonfiction, kind of a David Attenborough journey through space and time, that kind of a format. But it was intriguing, and it kept me sat down in front of the television for an hour, and then got me thinking on different things about space and astronomy and some of the historical figures that they covered during the various episodes. It was a 13-episode broadcast on a public broadcast system here in the States, and it did its job. It entertained me. I mean, there's no internet. Entertainment was grab your buddies and go on a bike ride for about 6 or 7 hours and, stay out your parents' hair back in the day. But this kept me in front of the television, and it got me thinking about things.
Yeah, I mean, I think people often underestimate like how big an impact the stuff we consume for entertainment, especially as kids, can have on our education going forward. Because I mean, I grew up later on. The internet was just becoming more of a thing, because I grew up through the mid to late 90s into the 2000s and all that. And I was always very big into science stuff, science fiction, definitely, because, adults in my life were also massive geeks and and got me interested in all that sort of thing when I was quite young. I big into like animal documentaries and dinosaurs. Sure. And space is obviously a very big one. And honestly, I've never really grown out of that. So my first experience with Cosmos was with the more modern one, when I was really hope all those crows just sounding off aren't going to appear on my recording. because this is a recording method I've not tried before. But yeah, my first experience with that came when I was honestly older than the real target demographic, late teens, early 20s. This is really designed for younger kids to get them invested. Like, it's perfectly entertaining and interesting still as an adult, but it's not really who it's made for. I didn't know that. I had not actually heard of the older Cosmos yet. And I was just I was just running out of other documentaries at that point, because new information can only come in so fast for them to make space documentaries about and things like that. And I came across this and I watched it, and I wouldn't say, I mean, not really surprised, because I was into that sort of thing, but it was definitely a much more immersive and engaging experience, there they go again, than I was expecting. And I binged as much of it as I could.
It's interesting. With all due respect and appreciation for Neil deGrasse Tyson, I did try to engage in this latest version of the Cosmos, and it could just because of where I am at this point in my life. I didn't find it as captivating, I guess, or as engaging. I don't know. Was I more of a Dr. Sagan fan or whatever? But it had an audience, and I believe it did do quite well, which is fine. You talk about the storytelling. I mean, it wasn't just all Dr. Sagan standing in front of a chalkboard or whatever. I mean, they used what was then, the available graphics on a public broadcast budget, and tried to take you to different places in time, even though, like, for example, they might have actors portraying, Copernicus or someone like that, and the actors themselves aren't speaking. They kind of put the cameras in such a way that, he'll stand in one part of the room and then turn to a colleague, and the colleague's eyebrows raise up or whatever. And that was, I don't think I'd seen that kind of storytelling before, but again, it was immersive, as you said, and it kept me entertained and informed and educated, and I really liked it. I do believe that to move this slightly toward fiction, hard science fiction is more my jam than, say, like space fantasy. My friend Andy, who he's more, I believe, more space fantasy oriented. I like the hard sci-fi, your Battlestar Galactica reboot, your Expanse, things like that. And I think some of that may be because of what the types of nonfiction science shows that I gravitated toward, things like Cosmos here.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think a lot of our tastes as we get older are still informed by the things that we enjoyed when we were significantly younger. I have no basis for that theory whatsoever other than my own experience and what I've heard from other people. It's completely anecdotal.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever met a person who you couldn't, with at least a little bit of work, draw that line between what they like now and what they liked when they were younger, more or less. I don't think it's like a hard rule.
And I can think back to, so like Space 1999 came on, and I believe it was 1976. And
Never
I saw that show.
That. No idea what that is.
You haven't? Oh my gosh. Oh, my friend, you have got to find Space 1999. In short, there's a international moon base, and humanity, for whatever reason, has been putting our nuclear waste on the moon. I guess we figured that was the safest place to store this stuff. And through
never mind, you have to do that, you have to launch it in a rocket through the atmosphere at incredible heat and speed.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, space travel is pretty, in this version, the moon's colonized, and they got like 600 or 700 people, whatever, on Moonbase Alpha, and through a several freak events, the nuclear stockpile, the waste stockpile, goes up in a humongous explosion, and instead of shattering the moon, it sends it out of Earth's orbit. And it's the adventures of the survivors as the moon travels through space. Now, I say all that to bring it back to Cosmos. I came to realize that no, that's not really how it would work. You couldn't have a planet of the week on Space 1999, when the moon's not traveling at near the speed of light, because I'm sure Dr. Sagan got a pretty good kick out of that.
Yeah, I often wonder how hard it is for some of these like people who are experts in physics and things like that to sit down and watch some of the absolute bull that goes on in some science fiction.
Yeah, but you got to you do have to now.
Yeah.
We as lay people can suspend our disbelief. Yeah, sure, but yeah, you're right. I mean, someone like deGrasse Tyson or Sagan or some of these other brilliant people who are just going to sit down. How do you sit down and watch a nice show like a Star Trek episode of Deep Space Nine and just kind of go, oh, okay, you know?
But so many of them do love that media, and in fact, a lot of them came to be where they are because of that media.
That's true. That is true.
So many people become scientists and things as adults because they were inspired by shows like Cosmos or by fiction that dealt with the sciences and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I look back at the episodes that they have here, and just week after week, the different subject matter that they would cover in each one was fascinating. 1 minute there, or one episode, he's talking about the speed of light. The other episode, he's talking about the origin of life on Earth, and then they finish up with the possibility of the number of civilizations there could be in our galaxy. You know, and you, on the one hand, you have this awesome piece of education, and on the other, you have something like a Star Trek Next Generation, where you're hopping in your kick butt starship and you're flittering around the galaxy from place to place, and you're having all these awesome adventures. So it is kind of cool as a layperson, as a sci-fi geek, just to compare the two. You know, your fiction and your nonfiction in this genre.
That's one of the things that I think that makes Cosmos so special, right? Is that despite being a documentary, it's just reporting the facts, because it does so. The way it does so by making it into a story makes it so engaging that even for people who aren't like super academically inclined, it can still be really interesting. I think that's such a good way to get not just young people, but people in general interested in the subject matter. I think what Cosmos did, especially because it was kind of one of the first things to do it, probably had a really big impact on like educational media going forward.
You know, I would like to think so, and I'm trying to. I mean, we're talking more years ago than I would care to admit, but I seem to recall talking about this show with friends. At least I want to say I have that memory, and discussing the episodes with a few friends. Not everybody. It's not like sitting down and watching the football game on Sunday, and then everybody's talking about it the next day, Monday. But this thing did have a big impact on me, and it did have it did color to a certain extent the type of, as I said, this type of science fiction that I would come to enjoy later. I don't think I realized it at the time, but as I've gotten older, it's kind of like, hey, yeah, I can see that.
It clearly had to have a lasting legacy and impact, right? Because decades later, these two famous people from very different fields, you've got the family guy, animator guy, voice actor guy, and one of the most famous and well-known physicists of our generation, I knew growing up, basically the next generation on equivalent of Carl Sagan. And it obviously had enough of an impact on these two influential people that they were like, no, we need to bring this back actually, and modernize it and do it again.
Right, and I think that's what drew me into it. To aside from the name Cosmos, and the presenter who was going to be taking us through this.
I'm sorry. It's also in the name. You just made me realize it's even the name is geared towards making it seem like an adventure, a story, engaging, because it's not just Cosmos. This is space. It is a Spacetime Odyssey. It's a really evocative name.
Yeah, and I forgot where I was going with that thought.
Sorry.
No, comparing the two, I'll segue back to that. As I said earlier, it may not have been fair to this updated version for me to compare the two. Now I remember where I was going. Speaking of updates, one of the things when I went into watching the updated version was I kind of wanted to see where the science had gone and how maybe some of the subject matter that was touched on the original one. Obviously, there's been advancements in science and so forth, and I kind of wanted to see how that would be presented in this new updated version of the show. But again, maybe I was at a different point in my life and it didn't quite capture me, but I should certainly hope that it captured folks or, guys or girls who were in the kind of position I was academically back then. I hope it was able to capture and help some of those kids now. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think it must have, right? Like it probably didn't have the same wide distribution because it was on National Geographic, which is kind of not really where people who aren't already interested in that stuff are going to go looking. So I think where it was broadcast was probably a bit unfortunate that it probably didn't have quite the same cultural impact that the original did. But I'm sure it helped. Like, it has to have contributed something.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. It would be a suitable legacy for Carl Sagan. And again, I mean, I think back to that time, and I think some of the most influential people, educators for me, were, I believe, Mr. Moody, my 7th grade science teacher, Mr. Burton, my freshman year biology teacher, and Carl Sagan. That's that's kind of the gentleman who helped me enjoy science enough and keep my head screwed on enough to get myself through high school.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up watching a lot of a lot of documentaries and stuff like that. So I was never like interested in celebrity culture or anything like that. If anyone had asked me what my who my favorite famous people were, I would have been sitting there going, I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson would have been on that list. Michio Kaku would have been on that list. And I think his name is it David Green, I think?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I know exactly. The English physicist, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Am I thinking of the right one?
No, that's someone else who I should remember his name. But he's also a really a good one, the English guy whose name is now escaping me because he definitely should be on that list as well.
Yeah.
And, David, it's gone. It's lost on me, but I think I know exactly who you mean.
But David Green, I'm not sure I know.
He's the string theory guy. He did a lot of documentaries and media appearances and talked about string theory. I don't know if I got his name right. Someone Green, but those were the people I would have listed because they talked about these fascinating things. I don't really care that X celebrity is divorcing for the 6th time or whatever. But this guy's telling me that the entire universe is made up of these tiny little strings that if they vibrate one way, they're this particle, and they vibrate this other way. That is weird and interesting. And then it's like, but I can one up that. Electrons can be in 2 places at the same time. I'm just going, tell me more about this.
Yeah, and I think one of the I'm going to try to quote this. One of the things that Dr. Sagan said during one of the episodes was he always referred back to humanity we are the way for the universe to know itself because we're all star stuff, essentially. All our atoms originated in the heart of a star. And so we have evolved to become a way for the universe to know itself. We're at the point where we're exploring and trying to expand our knowledge.
I know that quote. I've heard that quote. It was repeated to me. It's appeared on a few like documentaries and stuff. People who were fans of Sagan themselves becoming popularizers of science themselves and repeating it. But one of the places it was repeated was on the reboot of Cosmos.
Oh, appropriate. Appropriate.
I don't remember which episode, what it was about, but I just have this distinct memory of a very deep, gripping voice.
Yeah,
quoting that.
Now, did you ever see Contact with Jodie Foster, sci-fi?
I actually haven't. I'm aware it exists.
Carl Sagan wrote, and he touches on this. So, okay, so let me hopscotch around a little bit. So you had the 1980 release of Cosmos, and then about 10 years later, they did like an anniversary thing, and they re-released it on on public broadcasting here, and they did an epilogue at the end of almost every episode where Dr. Sagan at that point would come on and discuss advances in the science or whatever that particular episode covered. And at the end of one of the episodes, he talked about his book that he had written, Contact, where he took kind of a hard science look at the possibility of humanity's first contact with alien life. And it's a science fiction story, and then they took that and gave it a movie treatment, and that's where you get Contact with Jodie Foster. I loved the book. I mean, it's pretty deep reading, someone like me, and I thought the movie did. I mean, it did as much justice as it could to a book. You're never going to get exactly what you want when you turn a novel into a movie, but it did a pretty good job, and I can recommend both the movie and the book.
I had no idea, but it just goes to solidify for me that Carl Sagan is possibly one of the coolest people to ever live.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, here you got this kid who's not even sure if he's going to be what he's going to do with his life as going into a senior year in high school. If he can have this kid riveted and educating him on the subject of space and stuff, then yeah, he's pretty awesome. And again, like I said, I remember seeing him because he was part of the Viking landing mission, I'm pretty sure. And I think later on I saw him discussing the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 spacecraft as they were getting ready to get launched. I believe that was later in the 80s. I may be missing my time frame. But anytime Carl Sagan appeared on media, I was trying to watch it and see what he had to say. That's the kind of impact he had on me.
I feel like he had a massive impact on the media landscape in general, right? Because he was kind of, I mean, obviously it was before my time, so I'm hardly an expert, but I feel like he was kind of the first populist or popularizer, I don't know which one is a better term to go for here, of science. He was the first person to take actual science and present it to people as engaging educational entertainment and storytelling, right?
Yeah, and I mean, he had that pretty unique voice, and for a while he was the equivalent of kind of a meme because the way he would say the word billion, he kind of would say billions and billions. I'm doing a really poor imitation of it, but I mean, you would have Johnny Carson, the Tonight Show. He would riff on that some, and then occasionally you'd get other celebrities kind of do that, the billions and billions, and you knew who they were talking about. They were talking about Carl Sagan, so he was a little bit of a meme there for a while, but that spoke to his popularity.
Yeah, I mean, it helps as well. Like it might have even then becoming a meme. That means people are talking about you. That means your work is getting circulated. It was a good thing. He probably embraced it.
Yeah, I would like to think
it does
so.
help. And it does help that he was as like I've not seen many clips of him and things like that really, but as far as I know, he was an excellent speaker and a very good presenter. And
Very much
I think a good presenter can make anything entertaining.
I would agree with that. Yeah, if you can keep you captivated and the subject matter can be dry as toast, but if you've got someone who's presenting it in an entertaining and a fascinating way, yeah, you can get the essentials across anyway.
And he was kind of the first one to show that still applied to science, right? As far as I could tell, because we had Sagan back then, and he did all this genuine work to bringing science, complicated but important science to the masses. Because of him, we've now got Neil deGrasse Tyson and Michio Kaku and the English guy whose name I'm forgetting. He was in a band. He was a keyboardist. He got taped to a ceiling once.
I feel so bad about not being able to remember. But I think we're talking about the same guy. But
yeah.
But anyway, this I would encourage anyone, if you've got a kid who's middle, junior, sophomore, junior, high school, if you can get them to put the cell phone down away for a little bit and get them to watch this thing, I recommend it. Maybe even as an adult, if you're the kind of person who likes documentaries, generally speaking, and if you can find it, based on what you said earlier, it might be a little bit of a challenge. I highly recommend watching the original.
Yeah, I mean, I recommend either.
Mm.
Do both even.
Yeah, sure.
But I couldn't agree with you more. I think that Cosmos in general, as a entry into media history, is important enough, influential enough, and engaging enough that as many people as possible should see it, because you will learn something.
Oh, for sure.
Even if you don't become like super interested in the sciences, you will enjoy it. I think you will learn something, and if it is a young person, that can sow the seeds that will get them interested in a lifetime of learning.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And it would be fun as I do now, if you are consuming your science fiction and whether you're reading a book or you're watching a movie, maybe see that hard science fiction, see where it's drawn from, whether it's from something like Cosmos, either version of it, or something else that's a little more grounded. If you're going down that rabbit hole, look for the truth that these brilliant scientists who sometimes act as movie consultants, on something like that. See if they're true to it, like The Expanse. They use real, as I like to say, fiction is an uncredited. Pardon me, physics is an uncredited co-star in The Expanse. Now I can take that, watch that show, and then go back to an episode of Cosmos where he's talking about gravity and the movements of the planets, and I can kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, I see that. Yeah, I remember him discussing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a really good example of that is Interstellar,
Oh yeah, yes,
where they had actual physicists consulting on the movie and showing them the models and the math, and they then spent an obscene amount of money on creating a graphical recreation of what a black hole should look like.
Yeah.
If you were able to see it, because this is before we had those famous photos, the first photos of a black hole, and then cycle forward a couple of years, and people for the first time ever, thanks to the accretion disks, imaged a black hole, something that it wasn't supposed to be possible, and lo and behold, it looks exactly like a pixelated version of the black hole in Interstellar.
Yeah, and really cool stuff. Went and saw Interstellar in IMAX, and yeah, was blown away by and
Just for the black
appreciated.
hole.
Yeah, and really appreciated their attempt at making the science as real as possible.
Which honestly, we probably owe to Carl Sagan.
Yeah, I mean, the man covered a lot of different subject matter in there. Planetary motions. Yeah, he did discuss black holes. Occasionally, would refer back to the evolution of life on Earth and things of that nature. And so, yeah, it was pretty broad. It wasn't just, as I said earlier, a guy standing in front of a chalkboard talking about dry equations.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lesson for anyone who's working with kids in an educational capacity, be it an actual teacher or a tutor or a coach or anything like that. Whatever you want the kid to learn, a parent, if you want a child to learn something, make it make it fun, make it engaging and interesting, make it a story or a game, and they will learn it and remember it and like it and be interested in it and invested in it so much more than sitting there and just reading from a textbook or writing lines or any number of things.
Yeah, I think we've all had teachers who come from both sides of that spectrum there. Ones who are literally reading from the book and being kind of boring, and you're falling asleep at your desk, and you have others who are just engaging and making you want to absorb the material.
I look back when I was before I got sick and had to drop out. I was studying teaching, and the whole time, one of the things in the back of my mind was, I do not want to be one of those boring teachers who is just creating these unengaging, just repeating what is on the page in front of them lessons, because no one actually learns like that.
Right. I mean, one of the episodes he talks about the library of Alexandria. I don't know Alexandria from nobody at the time, and yet I found this thing utterly fascinating. This idea that this incredibly famous center of knowledge was lost to humanity.
Yeah, I mean that whole story. I could go on that about that one for a while, because the whole situation with the losing all that knowledge, the Library of Alexandria, is actually a lot more complex than just it caught fire.
Yeah.
But I mean, to be fair, he probably covered all that. They were nothing. Cosmos is nothing if not accurate and thorough.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, you just nailed it exactly in one. You went from, okay, there's a place in Egypt, it used to have a library, to, wow, what a tragedy.
Yeah, and
in
see
the space
now
of an episode.
exactly. See now at the time, as a late teen, I was kind of like, well, that sucks. But now as an adult, I can look at that loss and be like, geez, that just is awful. I mean, I appreciate the depth more now, as an adult versus back then when I was just a kid. But still, it was nice to be exposed to it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you glad for the advent of wider distributed media and knowledge and the internet, because in some ways, I mean, if the internet goes, we're screwed. But by the time that's happening, we're probably screwed anyway. But because there is an effort to take a bunch of the knowledge that's now on the internet and record the major significant knowledge and record it in hard form for future generations in case that slightly collapses. But as far as the modern context goes, the current context, it's so hard to permanently lose knowledge now.
That's true. But it's interesting in the rapid fire instant gratification way of life these days, whether or not you could get kids to sit down and engage with this kind of a media for the course of an hour. I don't know.
Genuinely, I think you could. Because the presenters are fantastic speakers. They're very engaging. And the way they present it doesn't feel like a lesson.
That's very true. That's very true. And if you can get your kids to sit down and watch it, go for it. Because
please.
I think it's great. Yeah, I think it's great. I pulled out my DVDs for the first time in a long time in preparation for us having this discussion, and I watched 3 or 4 episodes, and it's like, yeah, this is still good stuff. I mean, some of the facts that are available to us now may have updated, but the presentation was cool. The stories that they shared about the historical figures were engaging, and it was just all around a good series.
Yeah, I mean, meanwhile, I unfortunately could not access either the old version or the reboot. But
that is so
unfortunate. I think the fact that I can still have this discussion and be a part, an active part, and it has left enough of an imprint in my mind that even without refreshing, I can still talk about it. Should speak some degree of volume.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're 100% right there.
It's just very good.
Yeah.
Watch it. Make your kids watch it. Force your neighbors to watch it.
Yeah, for the grown-ups, it'll be a trip down memory lane. For the kids, it'll be like it'll be new and refreshing for them, I think.
Stuff like Cosmos is what triggers the next generation of scientists who make all the next great discoveries that the next third iteration of Cosmos will then talk about.
Yeah, that's true. It'd be, as I said before, it'd be a suitable legacy for Dr. Sagan.
I think he'd be proud of it.
Indeed,
I would be.
Yeah, something that could you produce something that reach across 3 or 4 generations and still be entertaining and talked about. And like you said, for you not having the opportunity to watch it recently, the cultural impact of the story of the show is still pretty deep.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things I think have left such a lasting and enduring cultural legacy and tangible cultural impact that is still going, especially in the realm of educational content, as Carl Sagan and his work with Cosmos.
Yeah, well, watch this and watch watch Contact, folks. I think you'll find them both entertaining.
I'm gonna go look for Contact after this.
Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, it would be interesting for you to consider comparing Contact versus Interstellar. Actually, well,
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Well, okay. Let me step back here. Interstellar was more of a true adventure than Contact. There wasn't that kind of adventure travel in it. It's a great story, so it may not be a fair comparison.
Contact is kind of them coming to us as opposed to
yeah. So as you being a writer, yeah, see what you think. Am I not being fair in that making that comparison between the two?
I'll be sure to let you know when I've seen it.
All right.
Until then, I think we've kind of covered pretty much everything we wanted to cover, so we can probably leave that there if you're good with that.
I certainly am. I appreciate you inviting me on. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime. I'm always happy to have you guys on my shows. So speaking of my stuff, if you are listening to this on Spotify or YouTube, you can also find both the other episodes of Ficsation and also all of my stuff for Stories Across Borders on my website, radfordwrites.com. I also post blog articles and things like that there. I put my stories and things I write up there, and you can buy my books through my site too, which supports me and helps me keep doing this. So I always appreciate that. And where can people find you?
Yes, my friend Andy and I, we are from Sonora Desert Media Group. We have a podcast called the Brockton Bay Chronicles, where we are covering Andy's first time reading of the epic web serial Worm by Wildbow. You can find us on YouTube and on Spotify.
And they are both very entertaining presenters who say a lot of interesting things. So you should go and do that.
And we are looking forward to having you join us once we complete the story, and we have hopefully a roundup discussion with you and my stepson. Hopefully we can make that happen.
Yeah, that there's another reason to go watch them. Sometimes I'm on and I'm fantastic.
Darn right.
All right. Well, goodbye.
Take care.